Today we're going to be reviewing the distributive property and combining like terms. So if you look at your notes page, the very first section is going to go over some vocabulary. And I want you to go ahead and make a note or highlight or do something under the vocabulary term, the vocabulary coefficient, and the vocabulary like terms. Those are our three big review words for today's lesson. And one of the big reasons I want to go back over these words is because you're going to need these. We're going to use them every day, probably all year in algebra. The first one is term. So just reminding you of what a term is. It's a number or a variable or a number and a variable together. Sometimes it could be a number and several variables, just as long as there's no plus sign or minus sign. That's a term. The whole thing is a term. Coefficient actually refers to the number in front of the variable. So when you have a term, whatever the number is called the coefficient. And we're going to use this when we use the words like terms. What we're looking for in like terms are terms that have exactly the same variable and they also have exactly the same exponent. And what that means is that to be a like term, you have to have the exact same variables. So for example, 2x squared and 3x squared, it's the same variable and the exact same exponent. Those are like terms. But if you look over here, you've got 4x and 4x squared. Same variable, variable of x, but the exponent is different. They're not like terms and you can't combine them. Okay, so regardless of how your teacher taught you last year when you were learning how to combine like terms, I want everyone to get used to the process of circling your like terms. And when we're talking about circling or making boxes around your like terms, the big key is to remember to include the plus sign or the minus sign, the operation that goes with that term. So example, what that looks like is we're going to combine number 1. Okay, so we look first and we're saying what are our like terms in number 1? And what we've got is we've got a positive 5x and we've also got a positive 3x. Notice I put my box around the plus with a 3. That helps me know what to do. So I've got positive 5x and positive 3x. When you combine those, the positive and a positive, your answer is going to be 8x. Now as we move over to number 2, we've got a couple of different kinds of terms. So we're going to start by circling our like terms. So we have a positive 5m, we have a negative 2m, we have a negative 3m. Those are all like terms, so I've put them all in red boxes. We also have a positive 8 and a positive 6. Now they don't have m's, so they're a different term, but the 8 and the 6 are like terms. So we're going to start and we're going to say, okay, positive 5m plus negative 2m. We have a positive and a negative, so we end up subtracting. So that equals 3m. We have a positive 3m and a negative 3m, so these actually end up canceling out. So since all of these have canceled out, we're left with 8, positive 8 plus 6, so our answer is 14. Okay, let's move on to example number 3. On example number 3, same thing, we're going to start by circling our like terms. We have a positive 6a, a positive 8a. We have only one b term, that's a positive 4b, and we have one constant, a term without a variable. Okay, so now that I've got these, positive 6a and positive 8a, that's two positives, so that's 14a. We only have one of the b terms, so plus 4b, and one constant. And that's our answer. So what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to work through number 4 on your own. Okay, so on number 4, we're going to combine our like terms. This is the first time we're really having to work with the exponent. So we have a positive 2x and a positive 3x, and then we have a negative 3x squared. Because of that squared exponent, they're not like terms. So our answer is positive 2 and positive 3 combined to 5x minus 3x squared. Okay. Now, look at number 5. It's a little bit different. We have an xy together, but we also have a term with just an x and a term with just a y. This will just help you see what it means to be a like term. So we have a positive 2x. If I look at these other terms, nobody else just has the variable x at all. So that's our only x term. Then we've got a negative 3xy and a positive 4xy. xy, they're exactly the same in both of them, so they are like terms. Even though there's a negative coefficient and a positive coefficient, it doesn't matter. We're looking at the variables. And then we also have, all by itself, a negative 5y. So now we start combining. 2x is by itself. We have a negative 3xy and a positive 4xy. When we have a negative and a positive, we subtract, keep the sign of the bigger one. So 4 minus 3, the 4 is positive, so plus 1xy. Now, do we write the 1? It's a 1xy. You can write it, but I want you to get into the habit of not writing that 1, because when we do things in algebra, a lot of times we won't write that 1. In fact, I'll never write that 1. So when you're working on a problem and you just see an xy, I want you to get into the habit of knowing that that's a 1 there. That's 1xy. So that's our answer. Okay, so now we're just going to take our knowledge of combining like terms and put it in application. Everybody already knows from earlier grades that a perimeter is just adding up all of the sides of a shape. So in this triangle, to add up all the sides of the shape, we're adding up 3x plus 7x minus 4, that's the second side, plus 4x plus 12. Okay, so all I've done is I've taken my perimeter and I've written it out in a long one. Now pause the video, take a moment, and combine your like terms and get the answer. Okay, check your answer against mine. Make sure that you did the same thing that I did. And then go ahead and pause your video again and do the next one, number 7. Okay, so go ahead and look and make sure that your answer matches what my answer says. If not, go back and check your work and see where you might have made a mistake. Now this next section, the property of numbers, that is something that you've known probably since 3rd or 4th grade. I put it there just to remind you. You can change the order of your addition. You can change the order of your multiplication. It doesn't change your outcome. You can also change your grouping by distributing. It doesn't change your outcome. So those are there really more for a reminder. look it over, make sure you understand it, but that's review that you should know. Okay, now let's get into distribution. Another thing that you learned last year. To distribute means to hand out. So we are going to go ahead and just look at this first example and see what it means to distribute. I don't know how you were taught last year, but I want everyone to get into the habit when you're distributing to draw your arrows. The guy on the outside is going to be multiplied times each guy on the inside. So I want everyone to get into the habit of drawing your double arrows. So once you draw your double arrows, we've got the outside is a 3, and it's getting multiplied times this first term, which is x. And then we do it again. Our outside is a 3, getting multiplied by the second term, which is a 2. And then we simplify. 3 times x is 3x, plus 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, so that's the distributive property. We're going to go ahead and do number 8 together. It's going to be the same process. Draw your double arrows. And then 3 times 4m is 12m. And 3 times -7, because remember that term has the sign that goes with it, is -21. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video and do number 9 and number 10 on your own, and then start the video and check your answers. Okay, the biggest thing to be careful with when you're checking your answers is when you multiply, make sure you pay attention to your positives and your negatives. So on number 9, make sure you ended up with a -10x and a -20. And on number 10, make sure you end up with a -6y and a +30. Okay, this last one is one that we do a whole bunch in algebra. So just making sure you remember it. We've got, on the outside here, we've got a negative sign. This negative is going to have to be distributed. Really, that's a -1, but the one's not written. So we're going to do the same thing with our arrows. We're going to multiply our negative times each term inside. So -1 times 2x is -2x, and -1 times 4 is -4. And that's our answer. Okay, so hopefully that was a good review for you on combining like terms and distributing. That is the very first step we do forever when we're solving equations or simplifying equations.